Hello, and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. This podcast is dedicated to the aspiring writer or artist and will provide inspiration and tips from top professionals, including today's incredibly special guest, Sean Williams. Hey, Sean.
Hey, John. How are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm
Great.
doing great, even with everything that's going on right now with our current COVID pandemic that's happening here. So how about down there in Australia?
Yeah, the same. We're managing. We're working from home. We're living in beautiful social isolation. It's I quite like it, actually. Except that I can't come visit you guys this year. What a shame.
I know. Well, we're moving it now to August, the end of August for our event. So we can revisit that. Yeah, we had to delay it. Yeah. For the time being, everything on this release is online. So as a brief overview, so I can have the everybody listening to this, Sean was a winner in 1993, Volume 9 of Writers of the Future with his story Ghosts of the Fall. He has since gone on to publish 39 novels, 80-plus short stories. He's won 3 Aurealis Awards. In 2010, he became a doctor. And so Doctor Who move over. We got Dr. Sean. And we've got, it's interesting when we have people here at the office who like we really like your YI stuff. I love your Troublemaker series, and I know some of our salespeople love the Twin Maker series, and we talk about, no, I like this one better. No, I like that one better. And
cheers, that's good to know.
Exactly, yeah. You definitely have very, very strong fans over here at Writers of the Future here in Los Angeles. So, Sean, since the purpose of Writers of the Future is to provide that inspiration and just like keep on going, guys, keep on going. How did you find out about it? Because you were earlier on. Now that we're in Volume 36, and you were Volume 9, how did your process go of entering the contest? How many times? And then what happened after that?
Well, my sister was the one who alerted me to the existence of the contest. I had dropped out of university to become a writer at the end of '89. Oh, gee, that seems like a long time ago now. Makes me feel old. Yeah. So the contest was in existence back then, but was back in single digits. And I was writing lots of short stories and didn't really know what to do with them. And my sister rang me up and said, there's this great competition. Look at the prizes. You could win a trip to the States. You could, win money and publication. You should enter this. And I decided that I would start entering every quarter. I made a sort of pact with myself that I'd put a story in every quarter with the hope of, winning one day. And I set off my first one and I didn't win anything. Set off my second one. It didn't win anything. But I kept on going, kept with it, wrote a new story every quarter. At least. And I think on about the 7th or 8th one, I think I was an honourable mention, which was a huge excitement. And by then I'd started publishing stories. I'd worked up the courage to start submitting them to magazines and had a few published. And I was getting really close to no longer being eligible. And I think it was my 10th story. It was the last one I could enter. After that point, I would not be eligible to enter the competition anymore. But I submitted the story, crossed my fingers, and I got a call from the wonderful Rachel, who was in charge of the contest back then, all the way from America, saying that I'd won third prize in that quarter. And I remember doing a very excited happy dance in my little bed set. I was so excited, and because I live in Adelaide, South Australia, the other side of the world. In the middle of nowhere, like Luke Skywalker living on Tatooine. If there's a part of the planet farthest from the publishing centres of the Earth, that Adelaide's it. And I felt like it was going to be really difficult to get anywhere. So winning a prize in the competition was a huge excitement, a huge boon. The event itself was extraordinary, meeting so many other writers who were all in the same boat as us, meeting people like Tim Powers and Kevin J. Anderson, not to mention all you guys, It was an incredible encouragement. And then coming back to Australia and doing a whole heap of publicity. And things really took off from there. I started selling in better magazines. I started selling novels. It was really the beginning of my professional career. In lots and lots of ways. I got to join SFWA after that point. It was just a huge injection of inspiration and professionalism as well, meeting real published writers, meeting meeting Larry Niven and meeting these heroes that I'd had all my life. Suddenly, they were in my orbit. It was incredibly validating.
Oh, that's great. I know at one point you got connected up with Star Wars. How did that happen?
I did. So Writers of the Future was being in an elevator with a bunch of new writers, and everybody was saying, Richard Curtis, he's like the best agent. I really want to be with him. He's such a god. He's so fantastic. And I eventually ended up with Richard Curtis. I dropped him a line out of nowhere because of all this buzz I'd been hearing from Writers of the Future. And he took me on, and one day I happened to say, I'd really like to write a Star Wars novel. And he went, noted. I'll see if I can get you a deal. And I got really excited for a little while, but the wheels of publishing take a long time to turn. And It was a couple of years later that rang me up at 3 a.m. and said, you know how you wanted to write a Star Wars novel? I should mention this was the first time we'd ever spoken. All our business was based entirely via email because he's in New York and I'm in Adelaide, the back end of the world. He rings me up at 3 a.m. and says, we've never spoken before, but this is Richard. Get up, splash some water on your face and call me straight back. So I did. And he said, well, you wanted the Star Wars novel. I've got you 3. And again, I did a real happy dance. And he said, email this person, whatever they say to you, say yes, you'll do it, and call me back. So I emailed all these people and said yes to everything, including agreeing to go to Skywalker Ranch. So by within 3 or 4 hours, I had flights booked to go to Skywalker Ranch 2 weeks later and to meet up with Shelley Shapiro, the editor of the Del Rey line, the wonderful Shelley Shapiro, to discuss what these books would be. And that was another sort of an incredible launch, sort of projection of my career into this amazing realm that I'd always wanted to be in. It enabled me to become a full-time writer, which I'd always dreamed of being. So I managed to quit all my part-time jobs and become nothing but a professional writer, which I then did for another 20 years. Fantastic experience.
Yeah, it is. Now, you've written a lot of stuff with a writing partner. In fact, one of the essays in volume 36, Writers of the Future, just now releasing, talks about writing with a partner.
Yeah, that's right. Garth Nix, most recently, is one of my collaborators. Yeah, or Garth Nix and Shane Dix. It was a running joke for a while that I could only collaborate with people whose names ended in X. But it started because I've always been interested in collaboration, partly because back in the days when I was writing short stories, I wasn't getting out of the house very much. And collaboration was a way to kind of engage with other people, which is a very healthy thing to do. And Shane and I were actually approached by a small press publisher to see if we would like to write a book together in a new shared universe. And we decided that we would do it, that you don't turn down offers from editors lightly. So we decided we would say yes, but then we had to very quickly work out how to write this novel together. So I just joined SFWA, SFWA, and in that book, in the SFWA handbook, was an essay by Larry Niven on how to collaborate. And I thought, well, I'd better read this. Larry Niven, one of my heroes and a very famous collaborator. And he had a list of 12 or 13 guidelines for how to collaborate. And I thought that's exactly what I need. And 2 of them in particular have stuck with me all these years. And Shane and I, we had a very successful collaborative relationship in large part to Larry's wisdom. We wrote 13 novels together, I think, in the end, several of which won awards and several of which were New York Times bestsellers and Star Wars novels and all sorts of things. And I've never lost the bug. I've always enjoyed collaborating. When Shane and I decided to go our separate ways, I wrote with a couple of other people, wrote some short stories. Then Garth and I, we've been friends for over 20 years now. We'd always been talking about collaborating. Eventually we came up with the right idea and started writing together. We've had New York Times bestsellers as well, and it's just something I incredibly enjoy. So writing the essay for Writers of the Future Volume 36 was a great opportunity for me to kind of revisit Larry's advice and see what I could add to it or how I would rewrite it. So in a sense, I think of it as kind of a collaboration with Larry, even though Larry didn't know that I was doing it.
Yeah.
He might not be so happy. That kind of breaks one of the rules of collaboration. But I think it's a response to, which is sort of a collaboration. And that's one of the great things about science fiction. We're always in conversation with the previous books and the previous writers, and this is kind of a conversation with Larry about collaborating. It's one that I'd like to have in real life one day if I can pin him down at the next event.
Well, he's
not suspecting.
Well, he'll definitely be here at the next one, so we will hopefully be able to arrange that in August for you to be able to make it out there. But anyway,
that would be great.
That would definitely be great. So now, as far as like, what's your writing? First of all, are you still writing? Because I know in 2010 you became a doctor and moved more into teaching. Is that how that went? Because I know you've gone into heavily in teaching.
Yeah, that's right. I got my doctorate a little while back, and I didn't move straight into teaching, but it was a possibility. That was one of the reasons why I got my doctorate, was because I thought if I ever want to teach, I'll need that. But I also wanted the challenge, and I wanted to try some different things, and and that was a good way to do all that. And just recently, last year, a friend of mine who teaches at Flinders University here in South Australia, she was on maternity leave, and she rang me up and said, "I really want you to take my classes. I want to leave my students in safe hands, and I think they'll like you. And more importantly, I think you'll like them and you'll like the environment." And when I got that Star Wars deal years ago, I swore I'd never have a real job again. I was going to be a writer for the rest of my life. So I said to Lisa, "I've sworn I'm never going to real job again. I'm never going to do this." And she said, "No, just think about it. I'm not going to have the baby tomorrow. We've got time to make this happen." So I did think about it, and I thought, well, why not? I took the PhD for the challenge and the change. Why not do this? It's only half time. It's going to introduce me to lots of new writers, which is something I've always loved doing.
Right.
So I said yes to it, and almost immediately I realized how much I liked it and how much I could like it. So when the possibility of having a full-time job came up, I took that. And I started that at the beginning of this year. So I've been a full-time senior lecturer in creative writing at Flinders University all this year, which means that I have less time to write, so I'm still writing. I'm just writing less. I'm doing a lot more teaching than I used to. But I am still writing, and I'm trying all sorts of other things that I wouldn't normally have the time or the encouragement to do. So writing more nonfiction pieces, writing more experimental pieces. I've got to write a novel this year, so that will be something that I'll be focusing on shortly. It's a good time of the year to be locked in a house working on something creative. So
Indeed it is. It's something that writers can probably best take the advantage of, or creative people. Definitely.
That's right. We don't need the equipment. We just need a computer, and we can hammer away. Fantastic.
Exactly. So what's your writing regimen that you've got right now when you have I don't know, are you full-time job still right now? Or are you doing online? Are you doing like Zoom teaching classes, or are you just now done with that until it passes?
No, we're still teaching. Everything's gone online, and Flinders University was one of the first to go online. We could see where it was headed, and made the immediate decision to put all our classes online. So for a few weeks now, our classes and tutorials and seminars have been conducted through a really wonderful interface called Collaborate. Bit of buzz marketing there for Collaborate, and the transition's been generally pretty easy. There's been a few technical hiccups to iron out, particularly for students who don't have lots of bandwidth or have various sort of impediments, don't have headphones or don't have microphones or whatever.
Right.
But we've got there, and I've got a class this afternoon. So, and my class is a balanced role. So it's kind of 40% teaching, 20% in admin, and 40% research. So creative writing falls under the research umbrella. So 2 days a week, I'm still writing and working. But of course, it's spread out across the week. So my old writing routine used to be that I would get up in the morning and start working and stop when I had done what I needed to do. And that's pretty much the same now, except I've got a lot more emails to answer from students and various other meetings to be conducted on Zoom or Skype or Collaborate or however. But it's nice not to have to drive to the office. Not that we have the traffic that LA has, but it's still a slight chore.
Poor Sean. All that traffic. So,
all that traffic. Well, 20 years of working in my home office, I've been completely spoiled. I actually have to wear proper clothes when I go to the office, A shock.
Yes. When you write, so you've got your short fiction, your long fiction, your nonfiction. You've got then breaking it even further, you got your science fiction, you've got your mystery, you've got fantasy. So how do you juggle all of it?
I'm middle grade and YA and adult. How do I juggle all this? I guess the most important thing is that you should write what you write, because if you're writing something you don't feel completely invested in, your readers will be able to tell. So I kind of follow my instincts to a certain extent, but with an eye to the market always. I still want to publish the books that I write, and I think it's important that books be read for my sense of well-being. So I'm aware of what the market is looking for, but it does come back to what I'm urged to write. So my last novel that came out last year, Impossible Music, it's a mainstream YA novel set in the present day, set in the real world, set, in fact, in Adelaide, my hometown. It's the first time I've ever published a novel like that. And it's about a main character who goes suddenly deaf. He's a heavy metal musician, so he has to kind of reassess his relationship with music. So that was a radical departure for me, but it's gone really well, and it's been picked up nominations for some major awards. My next book is a middle grade fantasy about two kids who are trapped in a house that might or might not be full of ghosts. So I didn't plan to publish a book about people being trapped in a house in the middle of a global pandemic where people are trapped in their houses. It just happened to work out that way because that was the book I really wanted to write. And it was based on, I was living in Dublin, Ireland for a year in 2018, and this was the book that experience inspired. So again, kind of following my heart. So the next couple of books that I'm working on will be similar sorts of things. I'll be writing what I feel most passionate about, because at any moment there's probably half a dozen books that I would really love to write at various stages of readiness. So it's not like I am ignoring the market. I'm just picking the one that seems like it might be right, that my editors might be interested in or my agent feels they can sell. So it's a constant juggling act of all these various priorities that are combined to result in the final decision.
Okay, well, that makes sense, and that's I was interested how you do that, and like what's your inspiration. So it's basically because that's what you're inspired to write, and so you're going to write what you want to write, and if it's going to be YA, adult fiction, nonfiction, it's just that's what you're writing. So you're not concerned with being.
I'm a bit of a gadfly. Sorry, I'm not concerned with
with like some people, like Stephen King's known as a horror writer. You've got certain writers that they are known as this, and you're known as none of that. You're a science fiction, you're a fantasy, I know you more as a YA author. Actually, I mean, that's what I've really enjoyed a lot. Then there's the nonfiction, Sean. So is that, does it complement? Do they complement each other just because it bridges over so that someone who sees you as a fantasy now discovers you as science fiction?
Well, I hope so. One of the publishing traditions when you are confronted with an author like this is to use pseudonyms, to just like Stephen King did with Richard Bachman. He created a pseudonym to write slightly different kinds of books, and then he got caught. And J.K. Rowling did the same thing as well. She created her pseudonym to write crime novels. And I've always wanted to do that kind of thing, but my publishers won't let me. For some reason, I keep saying, maybe this one. I tried really hard with Impossible Music. I said, this one's completely different to anything else I've done before. This is my chance to do a pseudonym. And my agent and editors both said, but we love this book. Why wouldn't you want people to know it was you? So I went, all right, I give in. So I think people just are used to me flapping around and doing whatever I like. And maybe that's the kind of author that I am. The Australian Book Review once described me as the king of chameleons because I keep changing my colors, keep changing my spots, and that's not a bad thing to be. I think
it's not bad at all. That's great to call you like that.
It's a great position to be in too. It means that I don't necessarily have to worry about only writing horror or having to produce a horror novel every year. I can do YA realism one year and middle grade fantasy another year, and who knows what 2021 will bring. It might be an adult space opera.
Yeah,
well, I know it probably won't be that. I do love writing adult space opera. I would like to do more of that. The trouble is when you've done all these different genres, I would like to do all of them again, and there are still genres that I haven't done, like realist crime. I would love to do a crime novel set here in Adelaide, or a mystery novel or something like that. But how do I fit it all in?
Yeah,
well, I guess I'm still working that out.
Well, you're still a young pup, so that's okay.
I wish that was true. Don't forget, John, I was in my 20s when I came across to LA in 1993. So that gives you an idea that I'm not that young anymore.
Yeah, well. You still have a hearty laugh, and we can still sell that image. So I have somebody who routinely listens to the podcast had a question. This is one of our listeners, Christopher Henkel, asked about how do you determine when a unique point of view character is, quote, a fresh, compelling idea, unquote, versus, quote, limiting the market by using a narrow demographic as POV?
That's a good question. I think, though, that a good character is a good character, no matter whether we've seen that kind of character before. Does that make sense? If a character feels alive to the author, they will seem alive to the writer, and it doesn't matter if there've been plenty of stories about detectives and police officers, and private detectives, but crime is still such a burgeoning genre because writers keep coming up with new ideas, new characters based on that kind of role. And I think it's the same for any character. If you're wanting to set a story and you're using a clearly stereotyped kind of point of view character, and you're not adding anything new to that character, then yes, it'll be limiting, and yes, it'll feel. The author's job then, I think, is to find a way to freshen up that perspective and make it new. So now you see that in television too, with the rash of sort of Scandinavian or British crime shows, say, or even American as well, with detectives that have problems that might be autistic, or they might have violent fugues, or they might be OCD, or et cetera, et cetera. It's a way of bringing something new to what could be a fairly stereotypical character in order to spice up an already existing recipe. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
I think so. I mean,
I hope it does.
Because he gave an example on a nomadic Eskimo, diabetic Quaker, or 1980s metalhead from deep Appalachia. He says, I speculate most readers have lived most or all of their lives in the city. Would they connect with these sorts of lead POVs?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I see what they're asking now. Yeah, okay. No, I think absolutely. Write them freshly and vividly, and people will love that kind of thing. I think there's a thirst for new points of view and new experiences, and as long as you're writing them authentically and do your research, and sometimes you have to be respectful for people who exist in those roles. So if you're writing from the point of view of, say, an Inuit character, you might actually want to speak to some Inuit people, that kind of thing. But I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're wanting to write a novel that needs to be set in New York for various reasons, then setting it from the point of view of an Indigenous Australian will obviously be limiting in lots of ways, potentially, if they're living in the outback, but are supposed to be investigating crime in New York. But you wouldn't do that. I mean, no one in their right mind would do something like that. So I'd say go for it.
Okay.
Go for it and see what magical things eventuate.
Good. Well, that makes sense. And I know he's going to appreciate that. So now on self-publishing versus going through a publisher, what's your perspective on that?
I've done both, and my personal perspective is that I keep the self-publishing stuff for sort of things that are really important to me that I really want to get out, and I think my hardcore fans will be interested in, but I don't think we'll have a wide market. So the stuff that I think will find a market, I'd always rather go through a major publisher because I'm not a very good book designer, and I really love being edited by other people. And in terms of marketing, there are people who are better at it than me. So I'd rather go through a traditional publisher than pay for people to do that kind of thing myself. So, and having grown up with trade publishing, it's something I feel very comfortable with. And while they keep publishing me, I'll keep doing it. But that said, some people are really great at self-promoting and marketing and putting together a book package, and they should totally go for it. And you never know, and maybe one day I'll move into that area just to see how it goes. Maybe the trade publishers will all go out of business and or maybe not be interested in the gadfly like me, so I might try self-publishing. And, it could be a good experience. It'll be a bit hard on top of teaching, I think, to devote the time that it needs. I mean, self-publishing really is a full-time job. That's another reason why I didn't go into self-publishing early, was because I was really enjoying writing, and I was writing 2 or 3 books a year. I didn't have time to do all the extra work that self-publishing would have required.
But
I'd rather keep writing books.
Yeah, but you're also able to get an editor. I mean, you're able to get an agent too, which made a big difference.
Yeah, that really helped as well. That's right.
And winning the contest gave you a definite leg up on that as a writer feature winner.
Absolutely, that's right. I've been blessed with 2 very good agents in my career so far. So,
so you had 2 very good agents in your career so far.
That's right.
And with respect to someone who's just starting out right now, to get an agent versus if they're starting, like they got a great story, they've written it, and they want to shop it around. Do you have any particular, since you've gone through your curve down there in Australia, any particular recommendation on a suggested potential curve for them?
I think it depends on where they are to a certain extent. I mean, I really needed an agent in the US to sell my books in the US. Adelaide is such a long way away. Unless you've got the money and the time and the resources to travel regularly and the contacts to connect with editors, much better to have an agent who's there on the ground in New York, in London, in other places. So that was something I definitely needed. I was able to sell books here in Australia. I'd sold a few books here. But I knew that if I was going to break out of Australia, I needed to have that agent on the ground. But if you're living in New York, if you're living in London, you might be okay without one. So that's kind of where my advice generally goes. But some people just don't like the cut and thrust of that side of the business very much. You've got to be really ruthless. Having watched a few deals being negotiated, BCC'd on emails, it's pretty high stakes sometimes, and I'm not sure that I would like to do that for every book,
Yeah.
I've had incredible deals made because my agent said, that's just not good enough. Come back to me when you've got a proper offer. And I would have been happy with the original offer. So the editor did come back with an even better offer. Great. That's fantastic. That's what an agent is for.
It is. It is.
Yeah. And they're also there to protect you from things legally that a new writer would not be aware of. There are all sorts of bad deals that can be signed by people starting out unless they're really meticulous on the legal side and aware of all sorts of tricks that can be played on them. So I think it's good having somebody to look over your shoulder that way too.
That makes good sense, and it's worth the percentage you pay.
Oh, absolutely. And the third thing, is if something goes wrong. If something goes wrong with your publisher, it's fantastic to have somebody to ring up and be the bad guy and sort of cover you without you having to be in that really uncomfortable position. And I've really appreciated that down the years too, because things always go wrong,
Yeah, unfortunately, there are things that Murphy does have residency in a lot of places on this planet.
Sure does. It's inevitable, every relationship changes, and for both writer and publisher, it's a business. So, and sometimes the business stars don't align between those two parties, and it's great to have somebody there to kind of help sort it out. Yeah.
Now, back in 2003, you became a judge for the Writers of the Future contest. So
I did.
You did indeed.
So exciting.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what's your your take on the contest. We've talked a lot about various things here, but now as a judge for the Writers of the Future contest, I mean, it was a contest that was created by L. Ron Hubbard in '83, and it's gone on, and you were like in the 9th year. But what value do you see of the contest? It continues to grow. We just finished another quarter, and even despite what's happening, it was the highest ever on entries for both the writers and for the illustrators contest, and we're up to thousands of entries a quarter now. I mean, it's grown considerably.
That's huge.
It's very huge from entries from over 175 countries now that are coming in. So what's your take on, as a judge for the Writers of the Future contest, of its value to speculative fiction? It is up to 17,000 words. It's not novels. So what's your take on on its value for the genre?
Well, it's what it brings to writers is all the things that it gave to me back in '93. That hasn't changed at all. In terms of its value to the genre, it's an incredible sorting house for new talent. I mean, I don't want to use this analogy, but I can't think of a better one at the moment. But it's a great way of sorting through the chaff to find the wheat. Those absolutely brilliant new writers who are just on the verge of popping. It's a great way of bringing them to the attention of editors and agents and general readers just before they break out into the wider world. Artists as well as writers. These are incredibly talented people of all ages at the beginning of their amazing careers, and the Writers of the Future catches them just at that perfect moment. when they're maybe not in terms of the industry, they may not have signed up to anybody yet. So it's a great way for editors to catch people, just when they're available, or it's a great way to watch people becoming inspired and growing as artists. And I mean, some of the winners, they've been like their first stories. Some of these stories are incredible. People write their first story, submitted in, win Writers of the Future. Where to from there? I mean, that's the fascinating question to watch being answered as their careers progress, and the contest just captures them at that perfect moment. It's like watching. What's it like watching a shooting star or a firework, just the fuse, just going on a firework? You know that something beautiful and extraordinary is about to happen next. And when the Writers of the Future is there right at the beginning of it, nurturing and growing and finding and revealing and encouraging and through the workshop, mentoring and creating connections to make sure that these new talents don't disappear, aren't discouraged, don't feel like anybody's listening, etc.
It's interesting because you said you were a finalist once, and the same thing happened with Brandon Sanderson. He had written several novels and submitted, and he was seriously considering throwing in the towel, and he got a finalist certificate from Writers of the Future. And that was just like, for him, it was, keep on going, just persist, don't give up. And shortly thereafter, he sold his first novel, and he's hardly looked back since then.
Oh, so, that's right. Yeah.
So the value, because now because there's so many more people entering, and it's we have a lot more of the honorable mentions and the final certificates that get sent out.
Yes.
So there's definite. I'd like you to maybe explain a little bit more, like the value of getting one of those certificates. I mean, now people put that in their resumes, and it takes their name out of the slush pile too. But
that's right. Yes, it's a way of differentiating yourself from people who may not have the chops or the skills that you have. It's like being a member of SFWA or having been published in Analog, or it's such a mark of professionalism and talent these days. It's so much harder to win anything in Writers of the Future now. That the competition is so huge. So it's such a mark of success to get a nod from the Writers of the Future.
Yeah,
I'm not surprised at all that people are using them as signs of distinguishment or qualification. And they should totally be encouraged by getting one of them. I mean, for me, I really did get better over those 10 quarters that I entered, and I could see that through the certificate and the prize. And I see that too in forums online where people, they try, they get an honorable mention or a certificate, or and they go, yes, great, I'm going to keep going, I'm determined to win.
Yeah.
That encouragement is in an environment where you might send stories to your favorite magazines for years before selling anything, you need that encouragement. You need that validation from anywhere, from your peers, from your judges. So.
Yeah. And we also have the Rise to Future Forum, where a lot of aspiring writers are involved. We have one of our recent winners. He's in the forum itself. He's getting 2,000 views a day coming to the forum, looking at some of the different posts that he has, because he's got his favorite essays from when he went to the workshop. But it's the whole thing just continues to grow. Going back to when you came out here for the workshop, anything that stands in your mind from what you remember from way back when you were here?
One of the key things that I remember really clearly, I mean, it was a long time ago. We're talking 27 years ago now, and my memory is not what it used to be. But I remember really clearly meeting Kevin J. Anderson, and a very young Kevin J. Anderson, although he is older than me. I want to make that absolutely clear. Kevin is older than me. But he was already a successful author, but he was still I still have this image of him as being at the beginning of his, the stellar career that was to come. Dune and everything was still ahead of him. And I remember him being full of energy and loving writing and loving what he was doing, and making a living from it, and making a very good living from it. And I remember thinking, I want to be just like him. I want to be a novelist like Kevin J. Anderson. And that was a really powerful moment for me. One of the other really powerful moments was, the workshop with Dave Wolverton was incredible. That was a huge part of the experience. Even though I was massively jet-lagged and kept falling asleep and missing classes, I still learned so much from Dave. He was a real inspiration. But one of the really powerful things was meeting other writers who were at the same level as me. Coming from Adelaide and being a fairly shy young man, I hadn't really engaged with writing communities down here beyond a writer's workshop that didn't really do anything for me. So when I remember I turned up at Author Services in LA, and there was this group of, maybe there were 15 other people. I forget exactly how many people were there. And they were all as enthusiastic as me. They all loved writing. We all loved the same genres and styles of writing. We all had the same authors in common. We were all really thrilled to be winners. And I think there was one finalist. It was such a sense of joining a community, meeting like-minded people, finding my people.
Right.
And that was immensely valuable to me. It helped me come out of my shell locally and nationally and internationally as a public figure, I guess. Not immediately, of course, as a role model or a leader in the field, but just as a member of the community. And it was from that point on that I started going to conventions and joining committees and all that sort of stuff. It was I felt very welcomed and embraced there, and not just by my winners, but by fellow winners, but by the judges too, like Kevin. I remember having long conversations with Kevin back then. I was a nobody from the other side of the world, and Kevin took the time to kind of talk to me and encourage me, and was very friendly. And that you can't put a price on that kind of stuff. That's unbelievably inspirational.
And that's something that a lot of the other winners talking about, just totally shocked that their heroes were sitting down and talking to them like regular people.
Yes.
Totally feeling welcomed as a writer now.
I still get a buzz, when I come along to the award ceremony, and I'll, particularly when I was coming back in 2003, you'd be sitting there and Anne McCaffrey would pull up next to you and have a chat, or at the ceremony you'd be standing next to Larry Niven and having a quick chat, and as somebody who grew up reading both those amazing authors, it was incredible. And then later on you'd look across and you'd see Larry and Anne talking to somebody, as I was in 93, a winner who'd been plucked out of nowhere to be in this crowd, and treating them as equals as well. It's fantastic. Really great. Yeah,
I remember one very special moment when we were in Seattle. You were there, I think it was in Seattle, and you presented the award to Kat Sparks.
My dear friend Kat Sparks, that's right.
That was great, because you were able to fellow Australian, as a winner there. And hope you'll be able to make it this year too, because we have 2 more Australians that won this year.
Yeah, I'd love to. The trouble now is that I'm a teacher and I have to keep regular teaching hours. But maybe
now I have a question. Going back to when you came out here for the workshop, anything that stands in your mind?
I remember going to the library. I remember talking to a stranger on Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah, still do that.
And still do that. That's right. This guy I spoke to was a punk with a green mohawk. It's fantastic. I was looking for a light. That was my excuse. I smoked back then. Terrible habit. I don't do that anymore. But I could see that he was smoking, so I asked him for a light, and we got to chatting about punk culture in LA, which I didn't know was a thing, but turns out it was. So I had a great chat with him. I'll never forget that.
Yeah. So you had your stranger and your trip to the library and your object. You remember what your object was that Dave or Kathy or whoever it was gave to you?
No, I don't. Gee, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I was too jet lagged, I think. I do remember the classes, and I remember not being able to finish my story because I was just too exhausted.
Yeah.
But I still have the draft of it somewhere in my archives up in Queensland, I think. I don't have it here at hand at the moment, but it's funny because I remember certain things incredibly vividly because everything was novel. I'd never been to America before. It was my first trip to America. I think it was my first trip overseas on my own. So everything was incredibly new and fresh. So not just the workshop, but the food, the people, the accents, the sights, the sounds, the pollution, the cars, everything was amazing and inspiring. And I came back from LA, and the first thing I did was write a 23,000-word novella inspired by the traffic of LA. So it was incredibly inspiring, and I think I wrote that in about 5 days. I was on such an incredible creative high because of that trip.
Wow, that's great. So any particular advice you've got for the aspiring writer?
Well, you see, now that's a good question, and what I advise an aspiring writer to do is go to Google and put in Sean Williams and 10.5 Commandments, and you'll get an essay I published in January in The Conversation, which is my condensed advice for writers of all stripes, new writers, old writers, middling writers, and this advice will work all the time. It doesn't need to be qualified. So I mentioned before that I used to be in a writers group, and I did, and that can be really helpful for some people. But for me, it was not especially helpful. So that's not advice that I would give to a new writer because sometimes it doesn't work. Whereas things like read a lot and read widely is something that I would tell every writer. Work hard, write, listen to people, that kind of thing is on the 10.5 Commandments.
Well, that's great then. So where's that again?
It's on The Conversation, which is a website down here that publishes lots of articles for written by academics for a general audience. So I've written several articles for them now, and they've had all sorts of incredible readerships, and it's good. It's a great opportunity. This is part of the nonfiction stuff that I've been writing since I've been a teacher. It gives me a great chance and a great opportunity and a great outlet to think about and kind of spread some of the things I've learned down the years to a wider audience, I guess. And that's one of them. The first article I had in The Conversation was about the 5 story senses for writing for children, like sense of wonder, sense of humor. It's given me a great way to think about writing.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
And the other piece of advice I'd give to a new writer is, of course, to keep submitting to Writers of the Future. If you qualify, you should totally submit. Why aren't you submitting if you're not? It's such an incredible, amazing opportunity. Why wouldn't you want to be part of it?
Sure. Now, just for anybody that doesn't know, when this was originally created by L. Ron Hubbard back in the early 80s, some of the requirements were you couldn't have been a professional author. It's blind judging so that the judges only see the story and a number. And
that's right.
There's no age, there's no sex, there's no ethnic, there's no requirements other than the fact it's a story and it has to be formatted properly, obviously. And
yes, that's right.
You can't have been professionally published. And so it's open to anybody, and there's no entry fee. So just if you can just talk about that a little bit, why that is so important as a facet for any contest, but especially for this contest for an aspiring writer.
Well, it's the ultimate leveling contest, isn't it? I mean, it's to win a Nebula Award, say, you have to be published in a magazine and you have to have been read by its readership, and there are all sorts of barriers to entry to getting an award like that. Whereas Writers of the Future, it's available to any writer on the planet. It's available especially to new writers, so you're not competing with Larry Niven or me or Kevin J. Anderson or Nina Kariki Hoffman or any number of greats. It's a great way to compete only with other new writers. You don't have to pay to enter. So if you are coming from a country that's not as affluent as, say, America or Australia, there's no barrier to entry there. You can just, if you can afford to print your manuscript and put a stamp on the envelope, you can enter and have an equal chance of winning, equal to any other person on the planet, no matter where they come from.
And now we have it's also we have online entry. So now you can just go straight online to writersofthefuture.com, enter writer contest, and just upload it. Same thing with the Illustrator. You can do everything online, so it won't even cost you a penny to mail.
There you go. See, I'm showing my age again, John. Everything's changed. You don't even have to put a stamp on it, which is great, you know.
What will they think of next?
Yeah. and the benefits are so enormous, you know. This is, the prize money, the workshop, the publication in, what is it, the largest science fiction anthology in the world, the best-selling science fiction anthology.
Yes.
It's just such an extraordinary opportunity to leapfrog your career. It doesn't cost you anything to enter. All it costs you is work and imagination.
That's right.
And anybody can win. Anybody can win. The year that my story won, you'll remember this, John, the illustrator that took the gold prize was from Russia. Mm-hmm. And an amazing young artist who illustrated my story. I'll never forget him. It was after the wall came down, but things were, Russia wasn't a very open country, and yet this artist came from, the Eastern Bloc to America to receive his prize. Just incredible. Writers of the Future is full of so many stories like that. People from, what did you say? We've got winners from Iran, a winner from Iran this year?
This year, and Turkey, and 2 from Australia.
Turkey.
Yeah.
Extraordinary. It's a high, not just a high quality award, but a truly international award.
Yeah, it's it's really good. It really validates. And right now it's been an ongoing issue, which maybe you've experienced too, with budget cuts in education for arts, that this is an outlet that aspiring artists and with people like yourself around to spread the word, that it's still an avenue for people to still try and make it go with the arts.
That's right. I tell my students about it. I encourage them to enter, while they're doing assignments for me. They're writing good stories. I figure, why not submit them,
Yeah.
Get them in. And I know it's an extra deadline, but with me, you'll just pass or fail. With Writers of the Future, you have the chance of all this great stuff happening to you.
Yeah, and the way you become a writer is by writing. So the deadlines give you that necessity, which you talked about too. You had 10 entries, so you just keep on doing and doing and doing, and each time you get better because you're writing. The way you learn to write per your successful tips is a writer writes.
Writer writes. That's right. Sounds easy, doesn't it, John?
Indeed it does. Trust me.
That's right.
Well, all right. Well, thank you very much, Sean. This has been great having a chance to talk with you, and I really do hope we're able to work out getting you to come out here in August for the awards event. But either way, we've got you now on a podcast so people can hear you and enjoy what you have to say.
Well, I hope they like it. And it's been always nice talking to you, John. Always good.
Yeah, I so enjoy our friendship. And to everybody else listening, thank you. Subscribe to the Writers of the Future podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Writers and Illustrators of the Future are contests created by L. Ron Hubbard to provide a means for the aspiring writer and artist to be seen and acknowledged. It is free to enter and open to new and amateur short story writers and artists of science fiction or fantasy. And once again, Sean, thank you very much.
My pleasure, John. Thank you.